Have you ever wondered why certain plants that we have as houseplants have got red or purple backs to their leaves? Stick around with me and let's dive into what some of the scientists and some of the botanists believe is the cause for essentially what is the Louboutins, or the red bottom shoes of the plant world. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So as I mentioned, I thought today might be a good time to do a bit of a deep dive as to what a lot of the research and a lot of the scientists, the botanists, the plant physiologists have come up in terms of assumptions or kind of what their thoughts might be as to why a lot of our favorite plants have got red backs to their leaves. And I say there's a lot of different theories here because there are. This is the kind of nature of science. When something hasn't been kind of confirmed that this is 100% what it is, there are different theories and different scientists will test for different things as to why they would kind of be looking at the plant and just going, oh yes, this has got red leaves because X, Y, and Z. So let's have a look at some of those theories. But just to kind of refresh everybody's memories, because some people might not know that you can actually get certain plants. So this is the Philodendron L Choco Red, or the Rubri Juvenile. And you can see on here that it has got red backs to the leaves. And this is a very desirable kind of look and appearance that people search for in a lot of their houseplants. This is a relatively popular plant. Same thing goes for something like the Verrucosum, or even hybrids thereof. I can't pick one up, I don't think at the moment, to show you. I'll see if I can add some clips, but the Philodendron Splendid, I'm pretty sure it's a Splendid, which has got a Verrucosum in the actual parentage as a hybrid. But then you can also get things like some of these Calatheas that have got purple backs, not just red backs. And a lot of Calatheas will also have red backs. I don't know if I've got any that have got red backs. Maybe, let me just have a quick look. No, I think most of my Calatheas actually, ironically enough at the moment, have got purple backs to the leaves. But it doesn't negate the fact that these kind of appearances on the back of the leaves are all linked to potentially the same aspects. And there's four, from what I could find, there's four predominant kind of theories that scientists have got, and these are the ones that I want to dive into a bit more today. So let's have a look at the first one. So the first kind of theory is for light reflection and light utilization. So let me paint you a picture. Say you are in a tropical rainforest and you're one of these plants that is growing at the bottom of the kind of forest floor or jungle floor, and you're not getting an awful lot of light. If you think about how the light would be coming into the jungle, it would be filtering through all the different leaves from all the trees, all the other plants, to finally get down to the bottom of the jungle floor, where a lot of these plants are trying to survive and thrive, which means very, very, very limited levels of light are getting to them. So what this first group of scientists believe is that the reason why these plants, and it's not all plants that are on the same level, some plants that are down at that level have got the red backs there. And this is an interesting one because I don't think a lot of people talk about this, is the light utilization. So what happens is that low level of light is hitting the green front part of the leaf, and then what is happening is that red underside, whilst if you'd imagine kind of waves of light going and hitting the leaf, it then hits that back red section of the leaf and it reflects back into the rest of the leaf more of that light. So it's kind of recycling that light back in to get as much of that light kind of benefit as possible to the plant and to the leaf specifically. Imagine that my hand is light. The light would be kind of, it comes in waves if I'm not mistaken. It comes in waves and it would hit the front of the leaf. gets used by all the lovely green parts of the leaf to be photosynthesized, and as it is moving through the leaf, that's the other thing, it would then hit that red back and just go back and reflect. So the easiest way I can kind of describe this is, I don't know if you've ever had, I don't know what they're called, those things that you put, I'm from a warm and sunny country, so when you go to the beach in a warm and sunny country, you tend to have these things that you put in your car windscreen to reflect the light back out, because you've been at the beach all day and you come back and you're a sweaty, like, hot mess, and you go into a car that is basically an oven at that point. So what you get is these, it used to be, and this is me showing my age, it used to just be some paper kind of fan-like concertina things that you would just open up and put against the windscreen. I think these days they've got ones that are kind of mirrored, so it reflects the light back out, and then they might even have like bubble wrapping in them as well, so it reflects some of the heat out. It's kind of doing the same thing. If you'd imagine, I know this is a very long way of me describing it, but like, bear with me, I've got a point to make. Imagine the red is that kind of car sunlight reflector, and it's reflecting that light back through that plant leaf in order for it to photosynthesize. And this recycling of light, as you would imagine, with such low light levels, is kind of needed for these plants, because essentially what they're doing is they're squeezing every little drop of goodness that light can provide them by kind of essentially recycling it back. So it reflects back from the red and it kind of nourishes the plant even further. Another leading theory that a lot of these scientists will have for these plants is that it's the reason why you get the purple or you get the red backs on the leaves is for something called photoprotection. And this is almost the polar opposite of what we were just talking about now in terms of like utilizing the light and recycling it because it's got such low levels. This taps into the concept of anthocyanins. And just a quick recap on what anthocyanins are. And this is something that you might notice a lot of the times on Hoyas or even succulents, when they get too much light and you see the leaves turn a blushing reddy color, is because essentially what that plant is doing is releasing, if I'm not mistaken, anthocyanins into its cells, and essentially it's making itself its own sunblock. So some scientists believe that the red backs on the leaves are there as a bit of a sun protection, as a bit of a permanent kind of sunblock that this plant would have in order to protect itself from the light. But I hear you saying, it's like, no, you just said that the light levels are so low. Yes, and this is why I'm saying sometimes not all scientists would agree with each other. This group of scientists would kind of go on to make the assumption that, you know what, sometimes the light that comes in, because again, remember we were talking about before, that light needs to travel through the canopy of that jungle floor. But imagine the perfect conditions come up and there is one beam of light that is coming in directly from above and nothing is stopping it. That is going to potentially sun stress this plant. Potentially as well, like if trees are moving because it's a high wind situation all the time, or if a tree falls entirely and all of a sudden something that had very low levels of light has now got intense levels of light. Mine is a pinch of salt with this one as well, because I'm just sitting there going, that wouldn't make it a permanent structure. For me, that would be more like a reactive thing that you might get with the Hoyas, you might get with the succulents, that then they would reabsorb that redness. And actually, I'm trying to think here. This isn't that, but let me bring you another Calatheas so we can have a look at it. I would almost say the opposite happens. So you might be able to see there's a very, very subtle blush there, and you can see the newest leaf has got a much deeper purple there. This was getting too much light, so it was blowing out the leaf in the front, but it was also blowing out the backs. So I don't know how much I agree with this theory, but it is a theory nonetheless. And then the comment is with the purple backs or the red backs, it kind of almost absorbs some of that light. Again, what we were talking about before with like a sunblock and everything that the plant might be creating if it is using something like anthocyanins, especially for the blue-green part of the light spectrum. Because again, I'm not going to go in too much into the details of color theory or the light wavelengths or the colors within a light, basically, but essentially it kind of voids itself out. I don't know how else to describe it. So if you've ever kind of dyed your hair blonde, and you know they talk about purple shampoo or blue shampoo, all of these things to take out some of those brassy tones. I know we're going slightly off kilter here from plants. There is a reason why you use the blue shampoo. It's because it's on the opposite side of the color spectrum, so it cancels out that kind of brassiness, that kind of orangey tones. Similar things are happening with the coloration against those kind of light levels that are part of the green and blue spectrum. Oh, and I'm just taking a moment to appreciate the fact that the sun has gone behind a cloud and I'm not currently baking in here. It doesn't mean it's not going to last very long, but let's carry on. Now there's another strong theory from another group of scientists that are saying that part of the reason why there is the red backs of the leaves is as a bit of a herbivore deterrent. And I'm specifically showing you a Calathea at this point because Calatheas also have the other element that they do in terms of like how they behave, which is moving their hands up. So if you'd imagine they move their hands up, the most obvious thing that is happening then with this plant when both of its leaves are up at nighttime is those darker shades of red or purple. Now, some of it might be obviously at night if it's really, really dark and the leaves are up. You might be able to think that a herbivore at night might be able to notice some very bright green colors on a leaf and just go and munch on it. But if it's much, much darker purples and reds, it blends into the darkness that might be happening into the jungle at that point of the day. The flip side, here comes the sun again to blind me. But the opposite side of the spectrum during the day, what will then happen is, if you'd imagine, say you're a herbivore in nature and you're seeing something that has got red on its leaves. What does that usually signal? Not necessarily just to the animals, but to a lot of humans as well, is that potentially that plant might be poisonous, or it just might not be something you want to be munching on. So similar kind of concept in terms of kind of an evolutionary adaptation is that by having those red or purple backs, basically, I don't know if that would work with the purple, but with the reds, definitely, basically, is a bit of a deterrent in itself, because the animal will look at it and just go, oh, if I have that, am I potentially going to die, or am I going to feel really, really unwell? Because everything that I know that has got a lot of red on it like that, it's usually like a danger sign from the plant going, do not touch me, I will make you very sick or kill you. So you can kind of see where the scientists are going with that line of thinking is, you know what, with the red backs, if a herbivore would see it, just by looking at it, it would kind of deter it and just go, you know what, I'd rather chew on this green thing over here. There's a bit of red on that, and I've not had good experiences with red-leaved plants in the past. The same part of that equation is that people are also kind of assuming that the flip side of what we were talking about before, about nighttime making this a bit like harder to find, at daytime, something like a red in a sea of green might make it super visible. So again, it's something that the plants, the herbivores might be going, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. It's standing out too much. It's standing out too much. But I don't think that's safe. Let's move on to something else. And then the plant gets to live another day, which is really cool if you think about it that way. It's kind of sitting there going, I'm a camouflage myself as something that might kill you, so do not munchy on my leaves. Coming into the final theory from another group of scientists is that possibly the reason why you get the coloration at the back of the leaves is for antioxidant properties. So this is an interesting one. This is one that I'm just like, ooh, never thought about it that way. So the anthocyanins, as I understood it when I was kind of like doing my research on this, the anthocyanins themselves are very good at kind of helping with antioxidant kind of properties. And it means that the plant is better able to deal with a stressful situation and oxidative states. And you would imagine something at that low ground level of the jungle floor would have a lot of stressors, basically. It might be kind of flooding, because if you're right at the bottom of the jungle floor, you might get some quick flooding and kind of what's it called, absorption of the water, or you might get a lot of wind because the canopy's at the top, but there might be less in between to stop the wind level. It might be predators, it might be all of these things that might be causing an awful lot of stress. The lower light level itself might be a stressor for this plant. So having the redbacks and having that kind of anthocyanin in there with its antioxidant property will mean that this plant is better adapted at kind of dealing with those stressful situations. It kind of makes sense, but this is an interesting one. Had you ever heard about the theory that some scientists believe that the reason why the redbacks and the purplebacks are there to provide kind of antioxidant properties? Similar to the way that, if I'm not mistaken, you would kind of put in some kind of serums if you're doing a facial routine. I'm not entirely sure, but I think vitamin C, if you're putting something like that on your face, has got antioxidant properties, and it's kind of more of a preventative, or in order to deal with that oxidative stress. Similar thing. So this plant is doing its beauty regime, but on a permanent basis. So kind of cool. So coming into my final thoughts about this. So the one thing that is consistent across the board with this is that there's no definitive, it's what I said in the very beginning of the video, there's not one definitive kind of study or research team that's just gone, you know what, we have proven this is 100% why this is happening. Which is true a lot of the times for a lot of scientific research, is that sometimes there's different explanations, there's multiple explanations for the same thing. The reality is, if you're in science for long enough, what you tend to kind of understand when it's these types of situations is possibly the reason why they exist, like all these multiple theories, is because not necessarily one of them is true or false, but possibly all of them or some of them are true. And it's a combination of these benefits that is the reason why these plants have got red or purple backs to their leaves. So it could be that yes, it is protecting it, it's kind of utilizing the light a bit too much for this plant because it's not getting an awful lot of light, or maybe it's acting as protection against the kind of bright light and reflecting that back in for certain other plants that might have red backs. And it could be because of the antioxidants, but it depends on the plant. It could be multiple reasons for that specific plant to have that specific coloration at the back of it based on its environment, basically. And again, this is something that not a lot of people talk about. It was interesting because I've spoken to some of the botanists that go out into the field to kind of look at some of these plants, and they were telling me something that people don't always, and I think I've mentioned this before, some people don't always realize this. So you get the Rubra juvenile or the El Choco Red, and you assume that, you know what, it says natural habitat, it's in Colombia. It might not be, by the way, I'll correct myself as to where this would naturally grow. And you're just like, okay, so immediately in your brain you just go, it could be found anywhere within that region, possibly in large swathes. But actually what some of the botanists are saying, that some of these plants, yes, they might be in, for example, Colombia, but literally the only place that you will find it is in a stretch of 100 meters of forest and nowhere else. So it makes that plant hyper specific in terms of the way that it looks and behaves to that 100 meters space. Do you see what I'm saying? If, say, for instance, the Rubra juvenile is in that very specific region and all of a sudden it kind of has to deal with constantly dark conditions because that forest has always been the way that it has been, or the jungle has always been the way that it has been, it will adapt to maybe better utilize the light and do the recycling of the light. If it's somewhere else, for instance, where you do tend to get a lot of trees falling, it might be because it's trying to like always be ready in case it gets blasted with some light. It just depends. The interesting thing that does happen sometimes, however, and again, I'll use the El Choco Red, if I'm not mistaken, it hasn't got to that stage with me yet, but as it's growing, a lot of these plants will change morphologically. And let me explain that a bit more. So say, for instance, this plant is happily crawling along the jungle floor, it hits a tree, it starts climbing up, it starts getting brighter and brighter and brighter light conditions. A lot of the times, not for all of them, a lot of the times for those types of plants, you might see the red disappear. So to me in those situations, again, it's all about context. To me in those situations, my humblest of opinions, I'm not a scientist, as I said, I'm not a botanist anyway, it might be that that plant is doing that. It needs those red backs when it's at the base of the jungle floor because it's doing that, kind of reflecting that light back into the leaf, so it has a better utilization of that light. But when it goes and climbs up and it gets higher and it gets brighter light levels, it no longer needs those red backs, so it no longer has those red backs. That's what I mean. Sometimes these plants, when they grow, they lose the trait of the red backs on the leaves. So I always kind of urge to kind of consider context with some of these things. So for instance, with a lot of the Calatheas, I'll go Proteas now, Stromanthes, Tenanthes, Marantaceae, all of these plants, they don't get to the stage where they're necessarily going to be climbing. So a lot of the times you don't always see the red backs or the purple backs on these leaves disappearing. And it just is the case that they're always kind of a bush growth habit rather than a climbing growth habit. So those plants will always have it, but maybe for the climbers, it will adjust and make sure that it's kind of best utilizing the light level and it doesn't necessarily need the red backs. All of this to say, science is always in flux. There's always new things that are being discovered. There's always new things that are being explored. There's always new things that we're kind of looking at. And it's very, very cool. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me geeking out. I know that a lot of you by this point, you've been with me, so I think you like geeking out about this as much as I do. But I think these are fascinating. And I think these are things worth knowing and worth discussing because it helps make us all better plant parents. That's all I wanted to say for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.